Hi everyone, and welcome back to Agency Lab. If you're new here, my name is Leah. Today I want to show you what I've been building during the last sprint. I've always wanted a space where I could bring all of my self-development practices in one place, to have the structure, the consistency, and the kind of efficiency I needed for my growth. I used to juggle a bunch of different tools scattered across different apps, platforms, but I've struggled to create a true operating system for myself. Something that could help me strategize, plan, grow, reflect, and learn all in one place. And so that's why I've built SelfDev OS. It's a simple tool that brings together 5 core self development practices: time tracking and investment, thinking through writing, systematic slow reading, planning leisure time, personal strategizing and planning. I won't go too deep into the methodology behind each of these practices today, but I've linked a public Coda space in the video description where you can find this sprint summary, a quick start guide including a custom GPT to help you figure out where to begin, a detailed knowledge base on each practice, and a sneak peek into the phase 2 improvements. For today, I just want to show you kind of a high-level workflow through the lens of a fictional character. Let's call him Thomas. Thomas works in logistics, but he's not passionate about it. He dreams of working in the music industry. His daily routine isn't great. Late nights, some drinking, no regular exercise. On top of that, he sometimes feels stuck and lonely, which is hard to process. So let's walk through how Thomas could use SelfDev OS to start making some changes, to track his growth, and to begin shaping a life that feels more aligned with who he wants to become. So let's start on the dashboard. So here Thomas gets a simple focused overview of how many projects he's currently working on, how much time he's invested this week, how much time he spent this week, when his next strategy session is scheduled, and his completed tasks and time metrics for each project this week. So you can see all of his active projects. You can see, invested versus spent time for each project, tasks completed, and then because Thomas hasn't completed any tasks this week, you don't see them here yet, but you will see them once he starts actually working through each of these tasks. And you also see some recent activities. So it's his personal growth control center. So let's move on. Let's go into the initial strategy setup session. So here, Thomas begins by writing down what's really bothering him. For now, he's tracking 2 dissatisfaction mainly. He's not working in the music industry, and he's feeling tired, low energy, and he has poor sleep habits, which affects his life both mentally and physically. This is where Thomas captures what's not working in his life and what he'd like to improve. Next, Thomas writes out his hypothesis, what might help resolve each dissatisfaction. For dissatisfaction 1, Thomas wrote, when I want to read a book about music industry trends and I want to take notes. I want to explore music production as a hobby. I want to track music-related time as investment time and set a weekly goal to make sure that I'm really investing my time into that project. For dissatisfaction 2, he has established a healthy routine, consistent sleep, limit drinking, daily walks. These are not the final answers to his problems, but these are small experiments he's willing to try. So once he's done with that, he's moving into the creation of projects. And this is where he's transforming this dissatisfaction, this kind of hypothesis, into actionable projects that he's going to then plan and work on. So I already went ahead and created a couple projects here. Click Create Projects. So we're not going to do this here. But once you're done with this step, you're going to see this screen, the projects overview. And then the projects overview, Thomas can review all his active and postponed projects. The reason why I've added a postponed project, and you can actually see this when you go ahead and add a project. You can add project name, project description, the type of project, and you can add whether it's active or postponed. The reason why I think that's important is I've experienced this myself where, you have a dissatisfaction. You have multiple different hypotheses, like small experiments of how you can resolve this project, these dissatisfactions. but you might not necessarily want to work on all of them at the same time. You might prioritize different hypotheses, different projects over the other projects. You really, shouldn't have more than 3 to 5 projects at the same time. But if you do want to keep them all in this operating system, which you should, you can add them and just click postpone. Just say, I'm not working on this right now, but I do keep this in my operating system because I might want to go back to it. But coming back to the projects overview. So Thomas can review all his active projects and postponed projects. Thomas can add new projects that aren't tied to his dissatisfactions. Just like I showed you, click add new projects. He can remove or update projects anytime. He can edit the projects. He can add tasks directly inside each project, and that's one of the important functionalities here, is that to each project you can add a task that you then gonna prioritize during your weekly planning session. So that's where all his current work and growth efforts live together, right? So let's move on. Let's go to the weekly strategy hub. So at the start of each week, Thomas uses a weekly strategy hub to review his dissatisfactions, prioritize his projects, plan his Pomodoro time for the week. This is kind of a weekly rhythm that helps him reset and stay focused on what matters. I won't go too deep into this weekly strategy hub, but I just do want to mention that it's a great start to pick the strategy day that works for you. Once you start your session, you just click start session, and then the weekly strategy agenda you see here is really what I do. But as you get the hang of it, you can edit my agenda, you can add new agenda items, and just go through it by one by one. Please look at the knowledge base section of in the coda, which is the practice number 5, the strategizing. You will have more about what your weekly strategy agenda could look like, and kind of give you some ideas to get started. Moving on, we can go to the weekly planning. So inside weekly planning, Thomas can add specific tasks for the week. He can pull tasks from his active projects, or he can add a standalone tasks like errands or admin work. That's where the big goals get broken down to actionable items, and I prioritized for the upcoming week. So I kind of went ahead and edit some tasks for Thomas. Added the estimated time, the time type invested versus spent, and then as he goes through that and completes it, he's also going to see his weekly progress, which is great. And then he also got some metrics dashboard here. That's also very helpful. All right, let's go to the time tracker. So Thomas uses the time tracker to log his invested Pomodoros each day, to build consistency, and to track what he actually works on. So that helps build him self-awareness, stay honest about where his time is really going, and really understand, okay, am I really putting enough time into, resolving my dissatisfactions? AKA for him, it could be, exploring music industry as a hobby. So you come here, you select the project, you select the task, you select whether this time type is invested versus spent, and then you just start your timer. And then you will see today's session, you will kind of see what you worked on. All right, let's move on to the reading list. In the reading section, Thomas can track his systematic reading. So he can list books and articles that support his reading and goals. It's actually not only books, it can be podcasts, article, blogs. I added that because I have actually a list of different podcasts and blogs that I want to read, but I can't just remember all of them. So sometimes I just come over here, add the title, add that it's a blog, what it's about, and add an item. And then when I come back here during my weekly strategy session, I think, okay, I wanted to listen to this podcast today, which is about my sprint topic, which is what I want to do this week. So then I prioritize this reading this upcoming week, if that makes sense. So anyways, he also builds a habit of consuming higher quality intentional content over things that don't really matter as much, right? So this helps our fictional character Thomas move away from low value passive scrolling to higher quality content that really can help him with his current dissatisfaction and his current plans of what he wants to do. So I've added the music handbook. Once he's done with that, he can mark it as read, and then it's actually going to show up in his read books come. All right, let's move on to the notes section. In the notes section, Thomas writes reflections when low mood hits. He can process thoughts and strengthen his thinking through writing. He can capture insights from his reading, and he can build his personal knowledge base. And as a demo, I've kind of added a couple notes here. I've added a note that's a personal note about how he, feels after work, and then kind of like his thought process about what could be causing the way he feels. Some thoughts from music handbook that could be interesting for him to go over, and then potentially, it will help him create new thoughts or kind of new directions or change what he's doing. It's all part of the thinking process. And then some other personal thoughts. So I myself add anything and everything, and then I just go through that during my weekly strategy session, and I either link it to a project, or I edit it, or I create an actual draft out of it that I can then post on my social media, or I just delete it. Sometimes a thought pop up, but you reviewed later, it might not be the most right thought you had, but that's fine too. The notes section helps stay connected to what we're thinking, feeling, learning, and that's just our knowledge base that doesn't just collect our thoughts, but also helps us really enhance our cognitive abilities. Because writing is just a very big part of thinking, and if you want to learn more, if you want to learn more about thinking through writing, do go back to the knowledge base. It has some really good information on that. So let's move into the leisure tracker. So Thomas also uses the leisure tracker to track his leisure time, make sure he's balancing work and recovery, plan leisure activities with intention, not just default to passive scrolling, right? So he has some walks here, he has some cooking, the concert, where he can log his sessions to see how much time he invested into leisure, because it's also very important. I always try to make sure that if I had an extremely busy week with work, I dedicate time to leisure, because that prevents burnout, that prevents, depression, and just all the certain things that can then stop you from actually dedicating time towards your work. So it's very easy. You add activity, you add, what type of activity it is, exercise, creative, social, outdoor, how often you want to do this, you add activity, and then it pops up here, and then you log your sessions. Very straightforward. All right, so we went through the dashboard, we went through initial strategy setup, weekly strategy hub, project overview, time tracker, reading, notes, leisure, weekly planning. We went through everything, and as a wrap up, I just want to say that that was obviously a very quick walkthrough of SelfDev OS. There's a lot more that I could share with you guys, but please feel free to go to Knowledge Base and read more about it. It's a simple but powerful space to bring all of your self-development practices together in one place. You can check out the full sprint, the quick start guide, the knowledge base, and try out the SelfDev OS tool yourself and set up your own operating system. If this resonates with you, I'd love to hear what kind of self-development system you'd want to build for yourself. If you have any suggestions for improvements, or, I would love to know. I always want to know how people plan their strategy sessions, what they do during their strategy sessions, and I just, I want to know more. So if you're using it, if this resonated, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.